Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar. We are delighted to have Dr. Nicole Smith. We thank her for accepting the invitation and will be presenting on strategies for supporting students with autism. Before I officially introduce Dr. Smith, please allow me to address a few logistical items. I am Will Francis, Project Director for Post-Secondary Education at the Tarjan Center. The Tarjan Center at UCLA is a federally designated Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities and your host for today's webinar. Support for today's webinar comes from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office through a contract that enables us to provide technical assistance and training to California Community College's DSPS, who are working to provide equitable supports, services, and opportunities for students with disabilities, including intellectual disabilities and autism. A number of our colleagues are unable to attend today's webinar and have requested a recording of the proceedings. In order to facilitate access to a clean recording of the webinar, we have muted an overwhelming majority of the calls. As we proceed to the presentation, our presenter would love to respond to questions that arise from or that are related to the content of the presentation. Please take a look at the bottom of the Zoom program display where you may find a chat or text box. We are asking that you insert your questions into the chat box throughout the duration of the webinar. We will address your questions and welcome you to submit as many questions as naturally arise. You may ask questions at any time, and we will also try to reserve some time at the end of the presentation for additional questions. This may be a good time to test the chat function. Please take this opportunity to enter a greeting into the chat box. Thank you. Many of your institutions are currently having conversations about student outcomes that are focused on increasing the number of students who earn a degree, credential, certificate, transfer, or who secure jobs in their field of study. For a number of years, we have been discussing the phenomenon of the increasing number of students with autism spectrum disorder who are accessing our campuses. This presentation will provide strategies for assisting students with autism to navigate through community colleges in particular. Before developing the content of this webinar, we conducted a short survey of convenience to obtain insight on topics of interest to you. Based on the survey, we will be discussing strategies to strengthen students' academic skills and self-determination skills. We will discuss the educational impacts of autism and concerns around faculty attitudinal barriers. Dr. Smith will highlight some strategies to implement faculty development activities, and we will discuss best practices in educational assistance for students with autism. She will share some strategies for setting up and managing peer tutoring and mentoring programs. And throughout the webinar, we will attempt to respond, as I indicated, to your questions. In an email sent to each of you today, I attached the PowerPoint Dr. Smith will be using for the webinar. At this point, I would like to thank each of you for joining us today. And now I will provide some information about our presenters. Dr. Nicole Smith has served as the Director of Disability Support Services at Moreno Valley College for the past 3 years. She earned a Ph.D. in education from Claremont Graduate University. Prior to her role as Disability Support Services Director at Moreno Valley College, Dr. Smith served as an Autism Services Coordinator for Disabled Student Services at California State University, Long Beach. At Cal State Long Beach, she taught in the College of Health and Human Services and in the College of Education. She also taught graduate-level special education teacher preparation courses at Claremont Graduate University. Before her service in higher education, she taught students with disabilities in K-12 school districts for 7 years. Dr. Smith holds a master's degree in special education from California Polytechnic University at Pomona and earned 2 credentials, an education specialist credential for mild moderate and a multiple subjects credential. Dr. Smith has conducted a number of webinars for California community colleges, and we are happy to welcome her back today. Also joining Dr. Smith is one of her faculty. We have Jenica Kraus joining us. She is the senior interpreter at Moreno Valley College. She has a degree in social communication disorders, and she runs the autism group there. She has been there for 1.5 years. Now, without further ado, here's Dr. Nicole Smith.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for attending the webinar today. I appreciate the introduction, Bill, very much. So today we're going to be presenting on strategies for supporting students with autism on campus. And previous to this webinar, Will had sent out a survey to you all asking different questions and topics that you were interested in. So we're going to try to cover as many of them as we can through this webinar. And again, please feel free to use the chat box located at the top, and we will try to answer questions as we go along. So the first topic that we'd like to discuss are academic skills. And as Will mentioned, I have Jenica here with me today, who's been running our autism group. And did you want to share a little bit about the group, what it's called, and just a couple quick things about what you've been doing for the group before we start jumping into academic skills?
Sure. So here at Moreno Valley College, our autism group is called SAIL, and it's for student academic independence and living skills. This group that we formed here on our campus is to try and integrate the students to be a more cohesive student body, to be able to function more as with the regular student body and be able to communicate what it is that they need and be able to make sure that they're accomplishing their goals in a well-mannered way as a college student here. So we provide them with the support and a meeting place to try and get whatever it is that may be awkward or uncomfortable or something that doesn't typically get addressed to students in this on the spectrum, to be able to do that in a very inclusive and open, safe place.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jenica. So when developing peer group or when working with individuals with autism, it's always important, as we know with all of our students, to determine the baseline of what their skill sets are. And for this slide, we're going to focus on the academic skills. So some things that we work on in the group with the students and we know that are challenges with them are study skills, meaning having a certain amount of hours per day to study, studying every day, studying before quizzes. A lot of our students have expressed challenges in cutting out time of their day to do that, or maybe they're focused on other things. A lot of our students carry around iPads and tend to watch shows and different things like that on them that take away from their study time. Preparation before class. There's been a couple of students that we've worked with that have expressed the fact that they feel like they don't have their materials together before class, and so that tends to be a challenge, and they feel frustrated, and sometimes even to the point of them not attending class that day because they forgot a piece of equipment or a notebook, anything of that nature. Another thing that we talk to them about are focusing. So I know that's a challenge with a lot of us. I also have somewhat of a challenge with focusing. So we try to look at current research that's out there in terms of helping students focus in class, and then work with them individually that will help them. Timeliness, so turning in assignments on time and trying to organize their schedule sometimes is a challenge. So some things that we've done so far, we'll take the study skills piece of it. So what we do in the group is we'll discuss with students how many hours a week do you study? And there will be some students that say I only study half hour on Thursday for 3 classes. So what we tell them is that the typical amount of studying is 3 hours per 1 hour of class. We know that a lot of students don't necessarily go to that extreme. So what we do is kind of get the student schedule, like maybe have them pull up their calendar. Some students are really good with using an electronic calendar, like on their phones or iPad, and other students are better with paper calendars. And we will talk to them about modifying their habits to align with their expectations. So even though they're not going to study 3 hours per every hour of class, maybe telling them, hey, you're only studying 30 minutes a week. Why don't we move that to 30 minutes a day, or even 1 hour a day per class? And these are the types of things you should be studying, because a lot of time that's a very ambiguous statement. So, you know, letting students know, hey, you should be looking over your material, reviewing your notes from class, reviewing the textbook section that was covered in class, preparing for tests, doing exams. So giving them kind of a list of what study skills actually is. And Jenica wants to share something that she worked on with a student in terms of this as well, with calendaring.
So we have a student right now that's part of our group, and he definitely struggles with maintaining a schedule and maintaining his assignments, tests, etc., for the success of the class. So what we kind of came up with that he's really excited about, and that he is interested in seeing how it works for him, as I am, is almost kind of like a star chart calendar. So he is very tech savvy. He is one who uses his iPad and his phone and everything for several things. But because he is so comfortable with it, we're trying to implement a paper calendar that can also be color-coded for the 3 classes that he's taking. And everyone likes the rewards of the gold stars. So once he completes that task or that homework assignment, or showed up to class for his test, and the instructor had informed them that they were able to have 1 page of notes, and he was able to remember that, retain that, bring the notes, take the class, do the test, he would put a star next to it. And then every week we would go through and see where stars were missed or where they were not missed, and be able to provide incentives for him to continue that kind of progress. And that would help him in maintaining his grades, maintaining being on top of everything. And above that, it also helps him stay organized with his multiple classes and trying to keep him more focused when he is constantly seeing the distractions of his iPad that's connected to the Wi-Fi on the campus and always trying to stream some sort of show or something. So this kind of brings him back down to what the task is at hand. So we're excited to see where it takes him, but that's just a strategy that we've been working on to kind of take a step back even from the students that are very tech savvy.
Great, thank you. So just to reiterate, in terms of looking at academic skill set of students and looking at improving the different challenges that they have, determining the baseline of what their academic skill set is really important. Next, talking about the educational expectations, and then coming up with a plan that aligns with what they're capable of doing and what they're willing to do and what the expectations are. So again, that example of we're supposed to study 3 hours a week per 1 hour of class, you know, if that's just not manageable for the student, coming up with some expectation that is. And the 4 areas that I discussed, there's probably a few more that we could have talked about, and we can talk more in depth after the webinar, after the PowerPoint, if there's some that you have some questions on. But I think just really listening to the students and really holding If you're able to have a group setting, that's always really helpful. I know as commuter colleges, we don't have residential facilities. Some students aren't willing to stay on campus. And I'll talk about some of those challenges when we talk about the peer mentor group. But listening to what the challenges are that they have and coming up with ideas that are going to be helpful for them is really key to looking at the academic skill set. Next, self-determination skills. So again, discussing purpose for attaining education is what the ultimate goal is. Thinking about what motivates the student to go to school every day. When we've asked students this question, you get a variety of answers. One could be the student doesn't want to stay at home, or maybe doesn't have a good home life, or maybe home is boring, so they just want to go somewhere every day. Other students will say they have a career goal that they want to jump right into after they get their degree or certificate. And others will say they want to transfer. There's a lot of different things that students say about why they come to campus. They also may like the campus and may want to stay on campus for many years. So figuring out what motivates them is really important, and what they want to do when they obtain their degree or certificate. And trying to help kind of align that with their daily habits on campus and making sure that they're successful. So looking at those two things, there's a lot of different activities and work pages that we do with the students and kind of determining what that is. There's a lot of good websites that have worksheets that you can use for that. But really discussing that ultimate goal, that piques their interest. So we know a lot of our students generally will say, well, I'm coming to college because my parents want me to. But then having them explore different things while they're on campus is key, and kind of coming up with that goal themselves about what they can do every day to help reach that. So incorporating steps and progress check-ins is really important as well. Jenica, did you have something to add?
Yeah, so following in line with that, making sure that we pique their interest. That is very relevant and important, because these students are very easily distracted or can lose interest in what it is you're saying if they have no interest in it. I've even had some students verbalize that completely, where they just say, well, if this isn't interesting, I'm not paying attention. And that's very true with students that are on the spectrum. So something that an example of one of our students that we have right now is he's taking the computer classes, and his ultimate goal is to just get a job. So to make sure that we have piqued his interest and following up with that is we give him a task of continually looking at a specific job website to find postings of relevant jobs that he would qualify for once he obtains his certificate. That way we can maintain a status with him, checking in on his classes, seeing how he's doing, kind of reminding him to be able to get that job that you are interested in, you have to be able to get this certificate. And to get that certificate, you're going to need to put in the time and the energy to passing this class, because these are the classes required. So by connecting all of those dots with him regularly, it helps incorporate that into his schedule, into his thought process that he goes through every day. So being able to do that, because that's his ultimate goal, it leads him to being a little bit more initiative on his own aspects of class and assignments and looking things up and knowing how to do that for the future once he's done here taking classes.
Okay, great. So again, self-determination skills, really kind of figuring out what motivates the student and helping them find resources on campus so they're able to navigate it themselves, but also looking at that ultimate goal. And some of our students have benefited greatly if you have the resource to be able to do this, meeting with a counselor once a month and somebody that's you know, in your DSPS office that's aware of their disability to kind of check in with the student. A lot of times when they're looking at other resources, they may talk to different faculty members, which we highly do support, but understanding, you know, where that intrinsic motivation is coming from while they're in college is really important to be able to help them obtain that career or that ultimate goal, whatever it is, transferring, etc. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the educational impacts of autism. Some of these will kind of be a little more, we'll go through these topics a little bit quicker because we've already discussed them, but some of them are a little bit different to what we've talked about in terms of academic skills. We'll go into some behavioral aspects as well. So some challenges that students encounter on the college campus that we've noticed here in community college, because again, as Will had mentioned, I came from a four-year university before coming here, and some of the challenges are similar and some are different. So preparing for class, that really tends to be, you know, a highly noted challenge that the students face, especially coming from K-12 when they come directly from high school to college, just knowing how to prepare themselves on their own. So again, just kind of talking to them about what they've done, what the expectation is, and finding that middle ground is really important. Some things aren't as middle ground as others. Obviously, the student needs to have their materials there every day. They need to have studied the night before, need to be prepped about the material. But there can be some other areas that are a little more, they can be, you know, different for each student. Focus in class and during conversations with faculty, staff, and other students. So a lot of times students with autism will kind of be worried about, like, for example, a test that they didn't do well, and they may not be able to focus on the conversation at hand. So sometimes allowing that student to vent a little bit about what their frustration is, just say, hey, let's talk about that for 2 minutes. We only have a 30-minute meeting scheduled right now, so I don't want to take too much time, but I want you to explain what your concern is so that you can focus on what I'm saying. I think another really good thing to do is to ask them to paraphrase or what they would do. So if you give a directive, like, I really want you to go home and look at these 4 majors and decide which one's good for you, ask them, you know, what's your plan to do that? What time will you do that, so that you can, you know, that they understood what you asked them to do, because sometimes semantics and other things can play a role in how you're communicating with people. Something that we've experienced on our campus, and you probably have as well, is the students perseverate over different things that happen in class or something at home, and can oftentimes have outbursts on campus and in class. That tends to be a little bit of a challenge when people are not familiar with autism generally, or they're not familiar with the person in general. So specifically, we have a couple of students here, when they get upset about a test grade or something like that, we'll kind of go into the breezeways and be, you know, crying loudly or calling somebody on the phone and talking about it. And sometimes that alerts other people, either employees or other students on campus. So talking about those things with the students are really important as well. And letting them know that certain things are socially appropriate and certain things are not, and providing direct examples for them and having reminders for them not to do that. And then also you have code of conduct, which we'll go into in a little bit, which tend to sometimes impact your conversations with the student a little more deeply than just kind of sharing social inappropriateness. Being able to participate in class appropriately is something that we really work hard with our students on. A lot of times they talk about feeling isolated in class, around working in groups or when they're partnered. And this is something that I kind of hold near and dear, because coming from K-12, we did a lot of partner groups and things like that for assignments, and we would always try to be inclusive. And we know we can't really direct faculty members to make groups for students. They still like to allow students to have their own groups. So kind of working with the students about with students with autism about what their level of comfort is in getting in group work and how they can do it in an effective manner. Assigning roles, things of that nature tend to be really helpful for students. Also disrupting classes. So again, sometimes perseverating on things that happen in home or previous classes, or even the class that they're currently in. Maybe giving them something like a notebook to write down what their thoughts or their concerns are so they can discuss them in the appropriate ways is always helpful. and ensuring that they understand how they can communicate with the class and the rest of the the rest of the class as well as the professor in terms of asking questions and making comments. It's a little more difficult because some faculty members, professors really like students to just kind of shout out their questions, and they say no question is a dumb question. You know, always ask all your questions to me. And sometimes for students with autism or even students with other disabilities, they'll kind of go off on, they'll take that to heart and start asking a bunch of questions and things of that nature. So kind of reminding the students to stay on topic of what the class is really important, and to limit the amount of questions during class. Even though the faculty members sometimes open it up, sometimes students with autism will take advantage of that and ask a bunch of questions and maybe take over the class. So I think it's important as much as you can to have the students, if they're comfortable and maybe they have some behaviors that would be disruptive in class, to have an open dialogue with the instructor before class starts and let them know, hey, sometimes, you know, if they're not comfortable sharing their disability, that's totally fine. But just say, sometimes I ask too many questions or off-topic questions. Can you please give me a sign if I'm doing that? Or let me know what's an appropriate amount of questions for the class, and have them kind of tally it on a side note as they're going through the class session is really important. So social isolation, we talked about that a little bit in class, but also outside of class tends to be a struggle. As many of our campuses are commuter campuses, we don't have students living here, they kind of just come here for classes and then take off. Maybe they'll go to the library once or twice, or the cafeteria or anything like that, but they really don't hang out a lot on campus. And I think, you know, reminding them about the resources that are available on campus to them are really important. Maybe even going over some of the student groups or clubs that are on campus that might pique their interest and help engage them are really important. Also, encouraging that student to have a point person on campus, whether it's a peer leader or an employee on campus, a staff, a faculty member, an administrator, just so they have that connectedness is really important. Somebody to check in with, very, very helpful. And then having open communication with faculty. I can remember even as a college student myself, I didn't feel comfortable a lot of times going up to faculty members and having discussions with them about topics they discussed in class. But encouraging our students to do that is really important, because it helps pique their interest. It helps get them connected to maybe a field, a profession that they're interested in being in. So even if, you know, doing a little role playing or having them write down a question or two that they want to ask a faculty member that you develop with them as a faculty or whoever's working with a student with autism, that would be really, really helpful.
Just to kind of build off of that, with the students that we're working with here that are in our autism group, we definitely encourage that sort of faculty and student communication, just because, again, a lot of the times you'll encounter faculty that have not worked that in depth or have that much experience with students that have autism, and to be able to kind of bridge that gap by giving the students the equipment that they need to be able to communicate effectively with them, to be able to express what kind of needs they need in class, outside of class, and kind of gauge where that faculty instructor is with them. They bring that information back to the group, and we kind of help build that relationship and cultivate it to make it so that that whole 16-week semester that we have here, they're able to be comfortable with that instructor, to the point where maybe even that instructor becomes one of their point of contact, another support system for them. They could also introduce them to a group on campus and kind of help facilitate that role as well. And so by encouraging that kind of communication between the student and the faculty goes a long way, and beyond even just that classroom success, it also kind of gives a little bit more experience to the student to also be able to communicate with their peers without kind of getting that isolation feeling, because they're practicing their communication skills with someone who's a little bit more empathetic towards them, being an instructor and wanting success in their classroom for all of their students.
Okay, great. So the next topic that we have is faculty attitudinal barriers. Now, we know that we can't always change people's opinions and perceptions of different experiences that they have, but we can share current research and different ideas of how to work with people. As people in the DSPS field, you know, we tend to be able to work with almost anybody because of the different challenges that our students face and that they express with us, and we really work with them on a pretty deep level as compared to other areas on campus. But for the most part, teaching faculty generally feel kind of uninformed about how to work with students with autism. And a lot of that comes from, you know, not getting that teacher preparation that maybe our K through 12 teachers get. And so having specific classroom management, learning about disabilities, different cultures tends to be something that, you know, is difficult to add on top of their workload. So as much as you can do in presenting different opportunities for them to learn about autism, the more receptive they'll be to students. So some of the concerns that they have expressed or that I've heard over the years is that they have some challenges with class management while protecting privacy rights. So a lot of our faculty, we have great faculty on our campus. I can't say that enough because they're so understanding. They always come to us when we have questions. And ever since I've come on to Moreno Valley College, something that I've shared with all of academic affairs and the campus as a whole is that not only are we here for the students and to protect their rights and make sure that they're appropriately accommodated, but we're here as a resource for the campus and the faculty as well. So whenever they have questions, we're always open to that. If they want specific trainings or presentations for their departments or big groups of people, we're always happy to do that as well. And if anybody wants any of this information, like presentations that we've shared and so forth, I'd be happy to share that with you as well. But one of the concerns is, you know, a faculty member may come to me and say, you know, I have a student, I suspect maybe he has autism, or he's at least told me he has a disability and he has accommodations, but he asks a lot of questions in class and it takes away time from my teaching. And how do I mitigate that situation while protecting their privacy? So what I would tell them is to have general rules for the classroom as a whole. When I'm going through lectures, I prefer that there's only 2 points that people ask questions. One's in the middle and one's at the end, and I allow 1 to 2 questions per student, and then I'll take the rest of the questions during my office hours. So then if they have a rule like that, then it's the same for everybody, and that student will not be outed, you know, in having a disability or autism specifically, that they'll know how to engage with the class, there's boundaries there, and that's tended to be pretty successful for students. Of course, there's different situations like labs and different scenarios that tend to be challenging, but just working with the instructor and letting them know, you know, some good teaching tips or, you know, setting boundaries has proven really helpful. Encouraging students to participate in discussions and activities. Again, providing those boundaries for students is really important so they know how to engage. And again, that's like universal design for learning there, because that you may have other students in the class, disability or not, that are unsure or maybe shy and don't know how to participate in discussions activities. So I think having general rules and boundaries are really helpful for students. And then assisting students with study skills and assignment completion. Again, sometimes faculty members, you know, you sometimes get both sides of the coin. One, they'll be really concerned about the student and wanting the student to be successful, so they'll allow the student to turn assignments in a lot later without consulting with our department. And sometimes that sets the student up for failure in other classes. So I think, you know, just again, encouraging the faculty members to come talk to you and come up with appropriate accommodations for the students tends to be really, really helpful on both sides of the coin. Again, there may be a student that had doctor's appointments or something and maybe they missed a class, and then, you know, you have the faculty member cutting them off right away and saying, I don't know, but then, you know, you have medical documentation. So again, those conversations are really helpful. And some development activities that we have found to be highly successful. So again, just kind of sharing with the teaching faculty that you're here as a resource for them is really key, but also working with the administrators, like the department chairs who are faculty on our campus as well, but the deans who are administrators and the VP of Academic Affairs, and trying to set up opportunities for you to present to the teaching faculty are really, really helpful. On our campus, we have something called Faculty Flex Days, and that's a 3-day window where faculty can come and earn their flex credit. And there are a couple of different presentations that we've done for faculty. And one that we found that was super highly successful incorporated all the things that I have listed on this side, which are simulations, videos, interactive tasks, resources. And we covered about 5 or 6 different disabilities. And the faculty members really rated this high because they felt being involved in situations. And we always tell the faculty too, this is just a small glimpse of what a student could be experiencing as a challenge. So we don't, want anybody to walk away. I remember being in psychology classes and taking a psychology class and wanting to diagnose everybody. So we tell faculty members that this is not the purpose of this presentation. We have outcomes that state things like the purpose of this presentation is so a faculty member will walk away and understand that some of the challenges students face and how to use class management techniques in order to teach all students of diverse backgrounds or something of that nature. So that's kind of what the point is of the presentation. So the simulations could include different sensory issues for individuals with autism, maybe kind of getting involved in situations where boundaries aren't super explicit, things like that. And those are really, like I said, a good opportunity to teach faculty. Also, there's some really good videos out there. The interactive tasks, having them be involved in the situation, maybe be on the other side, is really helpful in having them understand, and always giving them resources. So if you can make up a flyer about different things that they can do in class, because again, they don't really get that teaching background that some of us have as educators. What they have is, a background in business and some teaching experience, but maybe they haven't had a lot of individuals with autism in their class. So giving them different teaching styles sometimes is helpful, especially if they're inquiring. And then, we've had a couple of cases where we visited classrooms and observed different behaviors and have been able to reconnect with the student and allow them to learn from their experience. Hey, I noticed that you asked 4 questions and the teacher really said that they wanted 2, or you asked a question about apples when they were talking about going to restaurants, so just trying to kind of give them some feedback. A lot of times, there's been a couple of cases where the faculty members have asked us to kind of just sit in the back of the class or observe something or connect on a different way. So, and back to the other slide too, there was one more thing I wanted to mention. So since we've done a lot of the Faculty Flex Day presentations, specific departments have asked us also to do presentations such as the Tutoring Center. So the Tutoring Center was concerned about connecting with students of various disabilities. So we kind of just used the presentation we did for faculty and made it more relevant to tutors and presented to them. So that was really successful. So it's really good to create one presentation that you update maybe every year, minimally every semester would be highly recommended, about how to work with students with autism and present to them if they're interested in, because if they ever ask, do you know that there's more people that want to learn from it. So the next slide talks about best practices. So, I think working with the instructional faculty is really key, but then also going back with the students and working with other areas on campus will be important as well. So I'm going to kind of mix around on this slide a little bit and talk about partnerships. So if you're able to partner with different areas, so we know as DSPS offices, we try to do everything, but sometimes we can't. So kind of looking at what the different departments on your campus already do and trying to connect with them so you're not duplicating too many services and you're leveraging your resources is really key. So we've partnered with Health Services because they offer workshops called Seeking Success, where they talk about stress management, time management, things like that. So we try to encourage the students to attend those workshops as well. If you can do, if you're not already part of your behavior team on campus, I know they call them a bunch of different names, but I'm actually the co-chair of our behavior intervention team. And I oftentimes will talk and give a little quick, synopsis of autism or anything else that pops up on the radar. Making sure that your conduct officer is aware about what autism is and how to support that is really important, because something that we've kind of started incorporating in our behavior intervention team and something that we did at Long Beach State as well was a lot of times when students get put through the conduct process for some kind of behavior that they have on campus, the college will highly recommend some type of service to be able to help them be more successful on campus. So sometimes it'll be seeking, some counseling services on campus. We know we don't mandate things for students, but highly recommend. So we've asked the behavior intervention team to highly recommend our sales group for any students that have social anxiety or autism or need any kind of assistance kind of behaving more socially appropriate or following conduct rules on campus, so that they're getting that direct one-on-one support. But also connecting them with peers is really important as well, because we know that a lot of times from research that students learn from employees on campus, staff, faculty members, things like that, but they also learn very well from their peers, so that are going through the same process as them. They're enrolling in classes during the same time. They're joining clubs, during the same time. So that kind of helps them be able to connect with somebody as well. Also, role play we found to be very highly successful. Did you want to talk a little bit about role play, Jenica?
So role play right now we're doing a lot of with our group. These students find it very interactive, which really holds their interest. Whereas sometimes in groups and stuff, these students may feel more talked to rather than talked with. And to be able to bring in role play and videos, and sometimes it could be something where if you have some student workers that you can even create the role play, videotape them, that way they recognize these people in the role play videos, where then you follow up with questions to see kind of where they stand on understanding the social cues, the mannerisms, the emotions, and how to handle situations that present themselves on campus and off campus as well. Because our group isn't only focused on the educational aspects, but also just the independent living skills as well. So to be able to provide videos and just short videos, 1 to 2 minutes, highlighting different emotions, different situations in class, confrontation, outbursts, an assortment of different things, and then being able to gauge where your students see themselves in comparison to this, or if they're able to recognize what's going on in these videos and be able to grow from it. And a lot of times, like I had mentioned, if you have student workers that they're familiar with from their accommodations that they see in the office or around campus or anything like that, if they see someone that they recognize on the video, they also get more excited and are more inclined to participate, because they'll even go, oh, I know that one, or I know him, I know her, and they're able to better pay attention because it kind of connects with them on a little bit deeper level than this is just another lecture that I'm sitting through because I'm supposed to. So role play has really become a very key instrument that we are utilizing in our group on a various topics, whether it's impromptu or if we've prepared some. Sometimes we'll be doing a different topic where we don't have any role play, but you kind of see that either deer-in-headlight look, or they're losing interest, then we'll go ahead and try and do an impromptu role play where we either involve them in it or create a scenario for them to kind of dissect. And it just keeps their interest going, and it brings them back to focus on what it is that we're talking to and talking about at hand.
So thank you, Jenica. So you may have some questions about how we run our group for individuals with autism. And I remember some individuals from community colleges that would ask me this question when I was working at Cal State Long Beach and presenting about this. So Jenica is actually our senior interpreter. So she coordinates all of the interpreting services that we have, and she's a staff member in our department. Fortunately, she has a background in social communication disorders and has her bachelor's degree in that. And so she was very interested in working with individuals with autism as well. So we've asked her to kind of host the group and you know, do the functionality of that in terms of finding a room, making sure we get notes out to the students and so forth. And then we recently hired a faculty member, Vivian Igloria, who is a part-time faculty member who attends the groups as well and presents on different topics from the counseling perspective. So it's been a really fruitful group in that we have a staff member and a faculty member. And I know that not all campuses are able to do that, but I think finding a way to be able to do it on your campus, I know that there was a couple of them that actually had the director hosting these groups for students. So kind of being resourceful with that, I think, is really important, and understanding what your students are interested in and what they're able to do. Because another struggle that we have specific to our campus is not only are we a commuter campus, but we don't have a lot of spaces on campus that students can congregate at. So the library, I mean, obviously students go there to do work and they'll get study rooms and so forth, but you know, there's not any real big quad areas or a bunch of rooms where students go in and do things, and even our cafeteria is pretty small. So our students don't attend workshops really often, which I've noticed kind of across the whole gamut, which is, you know, something that I think is really helpful for students, is to see other students going through the same challenges and be able to find a time where all students can get together, and things like that tend to be a challenge. So we've oftentimes offered food. That kind of brought a couple more students in, but not as many as we would have liked. So we try to partner with health services and also with our cafeteria to get gift cards. So if students attend 11 out of the 13 workshops, they'll get a gift card to the cafeteria. They're like $5 each. We've been able to secure some general fund money for that, or other resources on campus. Sometimes student activities will be able to support initiatives like that. They tend to be pretty helpful. So I think that trying to connect with what resources you have on campus and what you have directly in your department are going to be really successful in kind of putting together groups for students. And you may try something that doesn't exactly work, and I think kind of being flexible, maybe being able to change the day and time that you offer the workshop sometimes is helpful. And I think just making sure that you connect with students is really key. So encouraging and recruiting students on the spectrum to attend these groups. When students come through our doors and want to sign up for services, we always tell them about the sales group and let them know what kind of things they talk about, the days and times that it's there, to communicate with us about, you know, if they have any updates in terms of availability. But also when students unfortunately end up on our BIT team or our conduct officer, we try to recruit them and have them be part of the team as well. It depends on every semester really how many students we have. Currently we have 3 students, I believe, and which doesn't sound like a whole lot. It's a lot of resources being put into a group, but there are going to be other semesters where you have more or less students because of availability. So even though we only have 3, a couple of the students that are part of our group have been on the conduct radar. And so we've been able to kind of keep them successful in school. And to me, that's a huge enough success to continue the group and continue with the resources. But I think really just reaching out to students, if you can put up flyers on campus, present at department chair meetings or even classes is really highly successful. Some ways that we have found peer mentors to kind of pair up with the students. Sometimes we didn't do that this semester, but last semester we were able to do that. We connected with the Human Services Department here, or Human Services Club on our campus, and they all need community service hours. So the students that were interested in working with individuals with autism, maybe thinking about going into occupational therapy or some related field, found you know, some really good experience in working with our individuals on campus, and sometimes they'd be in the same class, so they'd be able to communicate other things to each other that maybe a staff member or a faculty member wouldn't be able to communicate with the student. So I know that other ways that peer mentors have been found are looking at the four-year colleges and maybe connecting with some kind of MOU or just an agreement generally about getting internship credits or community service hours are really important. So I think that, you know, setting these groups up and trying to have them be as, I guess, spread out all over campus in terms of knowledge is going to be the way that you recruit the students the most. But I see that there's another question about groups within sales. So we don't necessarily have groups within sales as of yet, but we have noticed the need for that because you have different levels of functioning in our students with autism, as we know. And I think, you know, we've had a couple of students that have come in, and when we were doing some more very specific targeted sessions, like, you know, how to raise your hand and ask appropriate questions in class, there were a couple of students that thought, oh, I don't need this. So I think following up in subsequent semesters, we'll probably offer different levels of grouping, possibly, or maybe change the level of the community group as a whole and maybe target the more specific things through peer mentoring. So we're looking at kind of revising. As I mentioned before, I think it's important to kind of survey the students, the staff, the faculty, and make sure that it's successful for the students. And even if you have 2 or 3, but you're able to see success in them, it's still important. But looking at, you know, changing things based off whatever your college demographic is and what you're capable of doing is really important. Continuing to do those campus-wide trainings, whenever you're able to do those, put a plug in for the group. Let faculty know that there's a group like that that exists and that they should encourage anybody that needs to be more engaged on campus to attend the group is really important. Following up with students is really important as well. If you're, you know, setting up a calendar for the student to maybe follow for studying or something of that nature, to make sure that you're able to check in with them and that they're actually following that calendar. If it's not working, kind of revising that for them is really key. So, so I see that there's another question about students not wanting the group. I think that does happen quite a bit, or they feel like the group's not going to be helpful for them because of the different levels of functioning. One thing that pops out in my mind to be able to help with that is to set up that peer mentoring program and really look at, you know, any kind of student groups or any majors that you have of students that would be interested in working with individuals with autism, and give them a training to be able to work with the students, like how to set up personal goals, how to follow through with personal goals so that they're able to do that. That's the best way to really reach a larger base of students that have different levels of functioning. If you're able to do groups, that's always highly recommended because that's a time for you to connect. And sometimes changing the topics, like I mentioned before, tends to be really helpful as well. And maybe not being as specific with those topics. You know, I think pulling up different TV shows or different videos, as Jenica mentioned, and going through and dissecting them is really helpful for students to be able to see that there's different perspectives of situations or how to behave more appropriately in different scenarios, and following up with them is really key. So let's see, I probably, so behavioral implications like impulsivity, perseverating, trying to help mitigate those is more of kind of a one-on-one approach. I don't think that's really something that can be done in a group approach. So I think in order to keep the students out of code of conduct, really helping them understand what the rules are of being a college student on campus, things that they shouldn't do, maybe that they're doing, examples of appropriate behavior on campus is always key. But trying to work one-on-one with the student to come up with different ways to focus, how to control some of the perseverating, especially when I have this one student that pops into my mind that whenever he gets a bad test, he is basically running through the campus screaming. And so he's been put on the radar quite a bit. And, you know, sometimes people will call campus police. Sometimes they'll call our office. And, you know, he's been here for quite a while, so a lot of our employees know how to work with him, but there'll be some that don't, new employees and so forth. And it's not really helpful to, you know, to always, you know, have the DSS office mitigate all of these challenges, because you don't, you know, we're not trained in emergency situations and so forth. So I think it's really important to put the onus back on the students as much as you can and say, hey, you know, you really have to stop this behavior. What can we do? What is something that helps you at home when you're feeling like this? And see if there's some way to help mitigate that here while they're on campus. So here's a slide on setting up and managing peer mentoring programs and workshops. So I think incentivizing it, I know we've already kind of talked about this a little bit, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you know, being able to offer them community service hours, food, certificates of completion, gift cards, something to add to their resume, internships is always really helpful for students. Again, I know that a lot of colleges face this, and we do to some extent as well, as students don't like to attend workshops. So if you're able to set up kind of a peer mentoring group where maybe you train the peer mentors and you have them connect with the students individually and they connect with a staff member, that may be a way to do it as well. But I'd like to hear some ideas, you know, maybe after the webinar or after this presentation. We'll still have a half hour left or so about other things that people have tried, because, you know, I definitely don't have all the answers, you know, and I think it's really kind of a trial and error thing. And for us, it's still a trial and error thing every semester. I mean, in previous semesters, we were doing peer mentoring. This semester, we weren't able to do it, but we plan to do it again in the fall and maybe offering a couple different levels of groups and things like that. But I think connecting with colleagues is really important, and learning about different ideas and how to implement it on your campus is a good way to, you know, kind of figure out what things are. But again, understanding the baselines of the students, what kind of information do they need? Are you seeing a lot of behavior challenges on campus? That maybe, you know, simulations, role play, dissecting videos is going to be key for them actually seeing an appropriate behavior versus appropriate behavior. Or is it more academic focused, and can you partner with other departments on campus that are offering study skills workshops? But it's really incentivizing those students somehow, you know, by being able to offer them certificates of completion. We'd all love students to be intrinsically motivated and get A's in all their classes, but that's just not feasible sometimes. So being able to offer other things like gift cards, if you're able to get some general fund money, or maybe to look into community partnerships. There's a restaurant that's close to our campus. We talked to them about our group, and they were able to give us gift cards to little lunch meal coupons to be able to pass out to students. So there's different things like that that you can do around your campus that might be feasible to you. But I think peer mentors is something that's really, really helpful. There's a lot of research that supports having peer mentors and a one-on-one connection with students. So again, we've used our human services club. I've not created any partnerships with our four-year universities as of yet, but we plan to do that in the future. But also student workers. If you are able to get federal work study students, or you have some student workers that maybe have a gap in their schedule, like maybe they're proctoring for a certain amount of hours and they're scribing for others or something like that, and there's like an hour gap, maybe they'd be interested in mentoring students. And I think something like that would be really helpful because, you know, they're able to kind of follow up with the student and so forth if you have minimal amount of staff. So, if there's anybody that has questions at this time, I think I've tried to cover quite a bit of what people have had thus, you know, in terms of questions thus far. But if there's other questions, I know there was some questions about sharing different things. Again, I said I would be totally happy to do that. So if you can put your request through the chat room, our wonderful will help me gather that information, and I'll forward it to him so he can send it out to the group. But if there's other questions or comments, or anybody wants to share what they've done on their campus differently that's worked or not worked, I would definitely welcome that, because I think every campus is so different in terms of the demographics, location, resources that they have, that we all benefit from sharing ideas from each other.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. So I have a couple of questions here. I'm not sure if you covered this one. So this question came from David. His question was, when we try to offer groups to ASD students, they have rejected the format, preferring one-on-one. How would you work around that?
Well, this has come up a little bit for us this semester, because there were some students that kind of felt like the group wasn't something that they wanted. So I think following up with students and trying to set up a peer mentorship network is helpful too. And maybe, you know, getting a group of those peer mentors trained and kind of meeting with the peer mentors and having them connect with the students could be a way to mitigate that.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth asks, how do you get buy-in from administration if they do not feel support groups or social skills training is important? Our campus is very transfer-oriented, and there's not a large amount of support for anything that is non-transfer students, for anything that's not related to transfer students.
Oh, that's a tough one. So I think it kind of depends on whether the buy-in comes from needing money or resources, or just not being able to allocate your time to the group. I'd be more interested in knowing which one of those it is, because I think these groups can be done being very resourceful. Sometimes you can connect with a graduate student to host these groups, but you know, if it's finding space, maybe offering it after school hours. I know that could be considered volunteer work and so forth, but I remember when I was at Cal State Long Beach, there was a group of students that wanted to continue getting together or doing like field trips together, and that wasn't something that we could necessarily support because of the liability. And so they started a whole meetup group, and it was ran by one of the students that was in, I think it was like a social communication department, and she was kind of organizing it and did a little paper on it for class. So it benefited her personally, you know, educationally, but maybe pulling it off during campus hours. I know it's kind of a lot because we already have so much on our plate, but that's kind of the first thing that pops into my mind, because it really just depends on whether, you know, you're needing buy-in because you need resources on campus, or you need money, or there, you know, what kind of the purpose is of it. Also, a lot of times when students get put on our you know, they come on the behavior intervention team radar, they really look at that because they want to be able to help these students be successful on campus. And the skills that we teach these students for socially are transferable. So I think maybe just doing a real solid presentation and seeing if there's a need from the students, if you could do a survey and trying to kind of bring it that way could be helpful.
Great, thank you. One of the issues we're having is students exploring relationships. What's acceptable and what's not, and figuring out boundaries. Can you speak to this?
Sure, Jenica would like to take this one.
This is actually a topic that came up in our sales group last semester. We had a student who was very interested in dating and would constantly be coming to group upset or frustrated because the person of his interest wasn't reciprocating. He didn't feel like they knew what he was talking about. Just constant barriers were being presented to him anytime he wanted to make some sort of connection. Again, our support group does go beyond just the classroom and the educational setting. We do also explore personal and independent living skills and other things of that nature. So we do support in school and out of school. And so we've done presentations, we've done role play on things that are appropriate to be able to say or how to interact with somebody when they are interested in entering the dating world, because it is a reality. You're dealing with young adults that are interested in it. They have the same emotions and hormones that everybody else does. So just trying to be able to address that, desensitize the stigma that comes with talking about dating and relationships, and to get them to open the door and ask those questions in an appropriate space, like our support group. It then provides them with tools, or at least kind of a little bit of a starter pack on how to try and talk to somebody that they may be interested in, and what isn't appropriate, or you know, keeping things, putting a little bit more of a filter and explaining why something can be taken in a way that they don't see how that's offensive, or they may not understand why the person that they're trying to talk to is looking at them like they're crazy, or that they just asked them to, you know, jump to the moon, and why that is being perceived in that manner. So we do a lot of, like I said, role play is huge here, and it kind of really lets us break it down to where we will put forth a scenario that they encounter because of their communication skills, and really express to them and try and get it through and in a way that they understand, and then try and have them not just regurgitate what we say, but express a way that they understand it, or a way for them to process it, for them to kind of get that aha moment of, okay, it's not appropriate to just walk up to them and say that. So a lot of back and forth with them we do in the group, but that is also because our group does extend beyond just educational support.
I see another question up here about kind of like the function of our office, how many staff and faculties do we have and so forth, and how much time we put into this group. So when I first came aboard, I was the first director of this program here at Moreno Valley College of DSS, and we had 2.5 staff and 1 full-time faculty member. And since I've come on, I have increased our staff at least by 2. And we now have a couple of adjunct faculty as well. So let's see, one of our adjunct faculty actually sits in veterans though, and that's a whole separate thing. But what the staff, so right now, Jenica, at this time, unfortunately, is almost only 80%. I hope to increase her at some point. But about how many hours a week would you say you put an effort to this group?
On average, I could probably get what I need done between 1.5 to 2 hours a week. And that's some weeks, including the support group that we meet with weekly for 50 minutes during our college hour, to try and ensure that we're not impacting the student schedule or any other study groups, because during our college hour there isn't really much else going on campus. So there's a little bit of prep time, but I'm also able to implement some aids through student workers by having them follow up with phone calls or emails to some of these students to encourage them to come to the meeting this week or the workshop, what it is we're doing, reminding them of our incentives. And that kind of takes a lot of load off of my shoulders as to what kind of prep needs to go into it. And I'm able to just really get down and get to business and get everything done in very minimal amount of time for the weekly topics or what it is that we're wanting to go through.
So, yes, thank you for sharing that, Jenica. This is a practical, kind of webinar. I want you guys to be able to have ideas to be able to implement on your campus. So if she spends about, a couple hours a week, one of those hours is the actual group, and just kind of implores the help of other areas on campus. And generally, people are very supportive of ideas that we have here on campus. I report to the Vice President of Student Services, and he is very, very supportive of, whatever we're planning on doing here, which is great, and kind of leaves, the workload issues and things like that to me. So I'm able to redirect any kind of, their day or whatever efforts into this. So if she spends a couple hours a week, I would say that the faculty member maybe spends like an hour or so. She tries to go to the group when she can and sometimes preps, but finding videos based off of their baseline, or whatever their baseline concerns are really, it doesn't take a super lot of time. But in terms of case management, I know this kind of sounds like case management, and it's not necessarily, because you're not really looking at the whole student per se. You're kind of just focused on what their academic issues are, or maybe their social engagement issues, and maybe checking in with them. But your peer leaders can do that piece of it. I think in terms of academic skills and social engagement, our students may need a little bit more support than other students with disabilities, the students with autism, but I think following up with them is really, key to having them check in and make sure that they're not ending up being unsuccessful in class or on the radar. But there's other ways, to do that, like, using the peer mentors. If you're able to do that, it's really, really helpful, I think. So let's see, what other questions? Anybody have any more questions for us?
While we're waiting for other questions to come through, I will go to my email because I think I may have gotten one or two that way.
Okay.
Let's see what we're having here.
Peer mentors, are they paid? So the first group of peer mentors, actually, no, none of them have been paid so far. We had students from the Human Services Club that needed hours, and so they weren't necessarily paid. But at Cal State Long Beach, we did have student workers. We were able to start paying them that way, but not here at the community college level. We haven't, this semester, like I said, we only had a couple of students, and we had a really good group of students during the fall semester that were interested in working with our students, but it was tough to be able to keep the same students on, and we have some scheduling things that we need to work out. Let's see, I'm trying to go through your comments here and see if I missed anything.
Are there any other questions?
And if you guys have questions later too that maybe you don't get to ask now, I am really happy to follow up via email and send stuff out too. Oh, I see another question being popped through. So what is your role involvement with parents? Let's see. So here as a community college, we haven't had a whole lot of parent involvement, which is not what I'm used to. At Cal State Long Beach, we had a lot of parent involvement at many different levels. And so what we started doing was hosting parent workshops where we would talk about different challenges that students might be having on campus, what we're doing to help mitigate those challenges, and what we think parents can do to start mitigating those challenges. And those were really, really highly attended and very successful workshops. We haven't seen those needed here at this campus as of yet. But a lot of times when you start building a successful program for students with autism, workshops, peer mentoring, students will start attending your college because of that, which is great. And, you know, at some point you may have a need for that. So I think it's determining the level of need, but then offering those workshops would be good. Let's see. So bridge programs between high school and Moreno Valley. So we actually do quite a bit with our high school campuses. We actually do the orientation, assessment, and counseling on the high school campuses, which is really cool, and something we work with our assessment and outreach departments to be able to do that. What we don't have anything specific for students with autism, but for students that are part of our program, we get them signed on before summer, like during the spring semester, and then we have incorporated ourselves into the first year experience program where we offer a guidance course specifically for students with disabilities. And then they're able to participate in the rest of the first year experience program, but then they become eligible for college promise and so forth. So I think having guidance courses taught by DSPS faculty members has been really helpful. And we have found them very integrated kind of in the college campus prior to fall semester starting, which is what our key, purpose was for doing these guidance courses and being part of first year experience. So let's see. The next question is, how should behavioral challenges impulsivity, perseverating agitation that violate the student code of conduct be handled? So, well, we have a very strict policy with student code of conduct. A lot of times, if the group suspects that a student may have a disability, they may pull me in as kind of a consultant in the conduct process. And basically, the group can make recommendations based off of the behavior issue. If, the student needs, some academic adjustments or counseling services or something that would be helpful in that. I don't know if there's a way to be able to mitigate that. If the behavioral challenges impact other student learning and so forth, and it's not something that can be mitigated through the office, and that tends to be kind of a challenge. And I think every campus kind of handles that differently. I know there are some campuses that allow aides, some that don't, classroom aides. Some, most community colleges are community areas, so volunteers or community members can be on campus, but not in classrooms. So I think that's kind of a tough question to give a blanket answer to. But I'd be interested in hearing how other people have handled behavior challenges that students with autism have that are handled. So let's see, somebody asked a question, would you need student permission to invite parents to a workshop? Let me think. The way that we did this at Cal State Long Beach, if I can remember, is I think we did, what we did is we gave flyers to the students that kind of talked about the parent workshop, and they could sign it or not sign it or take it home and show their parents to give it back to us, and that's how we invited the parents to the workshop. And we usually had anywhere from 15 to 25 parents there at the workshop. So the students actually did give them to their parents a lot of times because they were frustrated that maybe parents were too involved in their business, or they didn't want to keep explaining what the group was, or something like that. But they were pretty open to that. Oh, okay, so let me see. People are asking for my email information. I'm going to add it to the PowerPoint right here. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. I am much better with email than phone, so I'm going to add my email here, and I will also add Jenica's. That way, if you guys have just random questions that you want to ask us, you are welcome to do that. Let's see.
Another question is, how many students with ASD do you have at your college?
That is a good question. Since we've just had to start changing our MIS data, we've been kind of going through that. I'm thinking we have somewhere around 40 right now, and our total student count's about 450, 500-ish. So, you know, again, accounting for just us updating our, you know, department and district processes for accounting for disabilities, I'd say about 40.
Have you answered this one? Can you share the COR for that guidance class? Maybe you have.
Oh, yeah, that, if you wouldn't mind maybe helping me get kind of a list together of all the stuff that we need to send out, I can definitely
Sure.
add that.
I'd be happy.
Oh, I'm sorry?
I'd be happy to, thank you.
Yeah, sure. And that guidance class that we offered during the summer, it's actually changing this year, and I don't remember what guidance 45 is, but what we offered in the past was college success strategies, and we just kind of leaned it towards working, just had our faculty member from DSS teach the class, and they just added more information in there about, you know, that would be more pertinent for people with disabilities.
All right, very well. So we have a couple of minutes remaining, but in the meantime, while people are gathering their final questions, I would take this opportunity to thank you, Dr. Smith, for presenting another fine webinar for us today. And thank you, Jenica Kraus, for presenting to us as well, for us as well. So if there are any remaining questions, if you could insert those into the chat box. Here's another.
Yes, I'm always happy to do webinars, and you know, if there's anything that I can talk about or answer, I'm always happy to share best practices, different ideas, and everything. Let's see, we have a question here.
Hearing about your campus and passion has been so hopeful. Do you know of any CCCs, California Community Colleges, who have dedicated ASD groups or support?
Okay. We actually haven't done a lot of research in that, but I think that would be really good for the field to know about. And especially if I hear about those groups, I can maybe have them do an article for our KPED communique, because, you know, that's a really good way of sharing best practices or having people present at the convention, because that's where we get to hear about a lot of great stuff. But I don't know of any community colleges that have dedicated groups as of now. Oh, Santa Barbara City College, woohoo, there's one.
Sorry, I muted so that I could type away here. If you would be so kind, audience participants, to complete a short evaluation survey for us, that would be really great. We are very careful to take a look at your feedback and to respond accordingly as we plan these webinars. So it's critical that as many of you as could would complete the evaluation so that we have some feedback. We appreciate that. Again, if there are any additional questions, please feel free to email those to me. I will be working with Dr. Smith on collecting the resources that you have requested, and I will get those to you via email. We appreciate your participation. Again, we'll be here for a few more minutes if you have additional questions, and thank you so much for your time and attention today. Any additional questions? We're still here. I believe if people just simply click on that SurveyMonkey link in the chat box, it should take you directly to the evaluation. If someone wants to test that, if it doesn't work, please let me know. We so appreciate that. Great. So Dr. Smith and Jenica Kraus, thank you again so much for an awesome presentation today. And with that, I'll say good afternoon, and I will be looking for your responses, your questions via email. We will be getting the resources to you. And if there are additional questions, feel free to send those to me as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for your work in our individuals with autism.
Thank you. Goodbye. I'll be here for a few more minutes if looking at the chat box, just in case there are any more questions or comments. Very good. Oh, someone's saying they don't see a link. Okay, just a second here. I'm sorry, Nathaniel. I'm hoping you are able to see that link now. In either case, I'll send it to you by email as well. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, all.